everyone to one of these last sessions of the Indiana Leeds Summer Tax Workshop Series. My name is Dr. Leopoldo Parada. I'm a lecturer in tax law at the University of Leeds, and I'm co-hosting this series together with my colleague friend, Professor Lederman, who is now going to introduce herself and our excellent speaker of today.
Thanks so much, Leopoldo. I'm Leandra Lederman, the William W. Oliver Professor of Tax Law at Indiana University Maurer School of Law. And it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Andrés Báez Moreno. Professor Dr. Andrés Báez Moreno is a Spanish Associate Professor of Tax Law at Universidad Carlos III de Madrid. He is also a lawyer at the Madrid Bar with over 15 years of experience. He regularly acts as an expert witness before the Spanish tax authorities and courts, providing legal opinions on Spanish and international corporate taxation. In recent years, he has also specialized in the international taxation of individuals. He holds a PhD in taxation and an LLM in public law from the Universidad Carlos III de Madrid. And his areas of expertise are domestic company taxation and international taxation, both of companies and individuals, fields in which he has published 3 books and more than 50 articles and contributions in periodicals and collective books published in Spain, the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and the Netherlands. And today he's going to speak to us about, because not always B comes after A, critical reflections on the new Article 12B of the UN Model Tax Convention on Automated Digital Services. So with that, Andrés, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Leandra. Thank you very much, Leopoldo. Well, first, congratulations for the organization of this fantastic sessions. And of course, thank you very much for having me here today to speak about a topic that might be or might not be so glamorous than as the last news we had in the very recent past, in the very recent weeks, but which I think it's still an important topic. I will start sharing my screen now. Okay. Well, just to start, and particularly for those that might not have a complete picture of the situation today regarding taxation of services in the UN model, it was like 10 years ago that the UN committee and the UN model decided to go on its own path when it comes to taxation of active income, and particularly when it comes to taxation of services. In 2017, the UN model incorporated a new Article 12A, allowing essentially source taxation of so-called fees for technical services in the absence of a permanent establishment and also in the absence of physical presence of the service provider in the source state. This strategy was then implemented in a second stage recently by the introduction of a second article, in this case, Article 12B in 2021, that has a very similar structure to Article 12A. In fact, in the screen, you see a comparison of the main elements of both provisions, and you can see they are almost identical with some differences. Of course, the biggest difference is that Article 12B does not refer to fees for technical services, which are described in the model in 2017 just as technical managerial or consultancy services. The scope of Article 12B refers here to automated digital services that are defined as services provided on the internet or on electronic network requiring minimal human intervention by the service provider. There are other differences despite these structural similarities between 12A and 12B that you have written in red in the presentation, and they are quite critical and interesting for the reflections that I will make in this presentation, particularly the fact that whereas Article 12A imposes gross taxation of fees for technical services, Article 12B grants an option for informal like net taxation in certain circumstances. On the other hand, of course, the biggest difference is the scope of both provisions, but not just that. The problem or the additional differences here is that Article 12B includes also B2C services, so business to consumer services, something that Article 12A doesn't do because it excludes explicitly B2C services, and also the inclusion, this is a minor detail, of teaching services in Article 12b that are excluded in Article 12a. So actually, the main legal landscape that you should retain for understanding properly my reflections and my criticism on particularly Article 12b is exactly what you have in front of you. So same structure, normally following Article 12 on royalties of the UN model, and certain but sometimes relevant differences between both provisions. What can you expect and what can you not expect of this speech? Well, you cannot expect here a global evaluation of withholding taxes in the services of the digital economy. This is a work that I have already done. I've done it together with Professor Browner, so trying to make a comparison between withholding taxes on services and other options to tax the digitalized economy. And this is, of course, not a main goal of this speech. Either is it the abstract evaluation of Article 12b, so I'm not going to analyze the article in detail. What I want to do here is to analyze this new creation of 2021, so Article 12b, in relation to what we already had, so Article 12a. Answering essentially two questions. First question is whether 2b was necessary, or formulated in a different way, whether Article 12a was enough. And second, because not always everything that is useless, and I believe you will see that in a minute that Article 12b is useless, not always something that is useless is innocuous. Because I think that Article 12b is not only useless, but also counterproductive. So actually, the two main ideas of this paper and of this presentation is that, as you will see in a minute, that Article 12b is unnecessary and that Article 12b additionally is counterproductive, or if you want to say that's right, is harmful. Why is, in my view, Article 12b unnecessary, and why is Article 12a enough? Well, the necessity of Article 12b is generated by an interpretation of Article 12a contained since 2017 in the commentaries to the UN model. One could think, well, fees for technical services, which are technical, managerial, or consultancy services, cover whatever service. But actually, if you go to the commentaries to Article 12a, you may check that there is a restrictive interpretation of the scope of this provision. And this restrictive interpretation, to be found in the UN commentaries, is based essentially upon two arguments. First, the concept of fee for technical services in Article 12a must be totally dissociated from the domestic law of the contracting states, and we will see in a minute why is that relevant. And second, fees for technical services or technical, managerial, or consultancy services mean and must mean the application by the service provider of a specialized knowledge, skill, or expertise. And according to this, the commentaries exclude so-called routine service or so-called non-customized services from the scope of Article 12a. And this means immediately, of course, that the heart of the digital economy, which are normally automated digital services and essentially intermediation and advertising services, are excluded from Article 12a according to this interpretation. Well, in my view, Article 12b was unnecessary because Article 12a was already enough to cover this kind of routine services, this kind of non-customized services, this automated services that the commentaries to Article 12a pretend to be excluded. First of all, because I think that this connection to the domestic law of the contracting state is not well founded. The idea under which the concept of fees for technical services must not be interpreted according to the domestic law of the contracting state is that this is already defined in Article 12a, when Article 12a describes fees for technical services as services for or technical, managerial, consultancy services. And my point here is that this is not a definition. This is just a qualification. Neither the noun services nor the adjectives technical, managerial, or consultancy are defined in the treaty. So actually Article 3.2 here would provoke the application, or could eventually provoke the application of the domestic law, of course, unless the context otherwise requires. And here the whole discussion, as usual, when dealing with Article 3.2 of the model, is when does the context require otherwise? Anyway, I avoided this question, which is one of the most complicated in international taxation, and I just tried to give an answer saying, well, whatever path you choose, either if you go to the domestic law or if you try and build a conventional meaning of fees for technical services, automated services will be included under Article 12a. If you go to the domestic law, with the relevant but unique exception of India, there is no single country in the world, to the best of my knowledge, in which a domestic definition of fees for technical services excludes routine services, excludes automated services, excludes non-customized services. So actually, this is the reason why the commentaries wanted to exclude domestic law from the interpretation of the concept of fees for technical services. But if you consider that either there is no definition in domestic law, or you consider that the context of the treaty requires otherwise, in my opinion, applying the criteria of Article 31 of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties to the interpretation of the concept of fees for technical services will lead to conclude that automated services are included under the concept of fees for technical services. Either if we go to a grammatical interpretation, remember that the point of the commentaries is saying, well, the fees for technical services require the application of the service provider of specialized knowledge, skill, or expertise. And my question is, well, why do automatic digital services not require a skill or a special knowledge, a skill, or expertise by the service provider? Of course, it might not require it immediately in the providing of the services, but of course, the creation of the algorithm, the creation of the platform, or the creation of the whatever digital instrument that you need to provide the service implies the use or the application of the specialized knowledge, skill, of expertise. Also, from a contextual point of view, which is also a criterion of interpretation contained in Article 31 of the Vienna Convention, there are good reasons to believe that automatic digital services are also included. The UN model also uses in other provisions, I'm thinking particularly in Article 5.3b in the service PE provision, or in Article 14 that uses the term professional services, similar terms to consultancy or technical services, and they have never been interpreted in such a restrictive way, such as not to include automated services. But in my view, the definitive criterion of interpretation to decide and conclude that automated digital services are also included under the concept of fees for technical services is purposive. Whatever the purpose of Article 12a, and there have been several attempts, even in the commentary to the UN model, to define which is the purpose for Article 12a. Whatever the purpose is, it would lead to the inclusion of automatic digital services. Just to give you a flavor of the most common admitted purpose of Article 12a, which is avoiding so-called base erosion, not in the sense of base erosion and profit shifting of the BEPS project, but in the sense of the fact that you must deduct a fee that is paid, but you don't obtain source taxation in return. Of course, both automated and non-automated services, routine and non-routine services, customized and non-customized services produce this effect. But again, we can later go on the debate on this purposive interpretation. Also, this purposive criterion under Article 31 will lead to the inclusion of automatic digital services in Article 12a. So the final conclusion of this first part is that Article 12b was introduced just as a consequence of a wrong interpretation of Article 12a by the commentaries to the UN model. But in my view, the problems of Article 12b are not just being superfluous or being useless. There are additional problems because Article 12b might be counterproductive in certain or due to certain reasons. First, I believe that Article 12b might undermine the credibility of the UN model. it's really unheard that a provision that was introduced in 2017 must be now not amended, but complemented just 4 years later, even when in 2017, everyone was aware that services were the big piece of the cake of the digital economy. So actually, this very quick amendment, this very quick patch to be down to the UN model certainly undermines this credibility of the UN model. Second, in my view, Article 12b might have interpretative spillover effects on double taxation conventions that already count on an article similar to 12a, and there are lots of them in a research that we have done recently together with some students. We have discovered that almost 500 treaties in the Global Treaty Network out of 3,250 contain an article similar to 12a. And it's increasing due, of course, to the introduction of Article 12a in the model in 2017. Of course, the harm to Article 12a was already down by the commentaries in 2017, restricting its scope. But now, those countries wanting to limit the effects of Article 12a will find an additional contextual argument for the non-inclusion of automated digital services under Article 12a. Because of course, the answer to whatever tax administration or whatever country wanted to tax automated digital services under 12a would be, well, if Article 12a would be enough to tax these services, why do you need Article 12b then? I'm not saying here, of course, that the model generates or is a source of interpretation. I'm not saying, of course, that parallel treaties must have a big relevance in the interpretation of treaties. I'm just saying that a judge might be easily convinced by this idea of course, if Article 12a was enough, what do you need Article 12b for? The third problem, in my view, is that Article 12b might increase the qualification problems that already exist under Article 12a. Of course, the very first problem of Article 12a and of its very particular interpretation by the UN model commentaries was making a distinction between routine and non-routine services. Of course, this is clear on the paper, but when you try to bring this down to particular examples, this is not easy at all. And the addition of a new layer of complexity with the concept of automated, which requires minimal human intervention, to this interpretative conundrum of Article 12a and Article 12b will bring further problems. I devote a lot of pages in the paper to this particular new problems. If you want, in the debate later, we can come back on this interpretative and qualification problems more in detail. But what worries me more here, perhaps as an academic and not so much as a practitioner, is the fact that Article 12b brings huge asymmetries in the treatment of fees for technical services, so routine and non-routine services and automated services under Article 12a. Because if you remember, when we started with the first slides, they were almost identical, but they were not. They were critical differences. So my question here is essentially, first, why would be the rates be different under 12a and 12b, which they might be? And if you want, in the debate, we can go on discussing why the rates would be different. Second, why would be B2C services treated different under 12a? Remember, they're not covered by Article 12a, but covered by Article 12b. Third, why do automated digital services, Article 12b, offer a net taxation option, whereas Article 12a doesn't offer it? And finally, and this is minor, why are teaching activities? Well, this might be important for teachers, of course. Why are teaching services excluded from Article 12a, whereas they are included under Article 12b? In some of these cases, it is even worse. Would it be justified to having an asymmetrical treatment? Perhaps it would be other way around that would be justified. I give you just a flavor of why this asymmetry should be rather the other way around with the net taxation option under Article 12b. it has been said that gross taxation of automated digital services might be justified because marginal cost of rendering automated services might tend to be nil. Of course, this is debatable. There is a lot of discussion even among economists on that. But if there were to be an asymmetry, perhaps it would make sense to have a net option taxation under Article 12A and not having that under Article 12B, in which perhaps the gross taxation problem might be lower. Most of these asymmetries are deeper and more complicated than I described here, but I want to honor the time I've been given, which is 20 minutes, and I don't want to speak more than that was allowed, but I still wanted to have 1.5 minutes just to send some policy pieces of advice to developing countries that still want to preserve their taxation rights on automated digital services. And these pieces of advice are really clear. Of course, you might deduct that the first is do not negotiate treaties with 12B is a bad idea. Second might be perhaps amend your domestic law to make sure that automatic digital services are also fees for technical services, so that you might have an additional interpretative argument to say that not only the application of domestic law is excluded, but also you have under your domestic law a definition of fees for technical services, including automatic digital services. Third would be raise your voice in the UN committee. Of course, normally, if you want to raise your voice in the OECD model, the normal way would be to formulate a reservation to the commentary. You might know that there are no reservations in the UN model. They don't exist. I mean, they have been excluded since the very invention of the UN model in the 1980, but still, countries having a similar position or a common position might try to raise their voice and get what is called under the UN model a minority position that, in my view, many of the countries represented in the UN committee would share, taking into account that actually they have tried to preserve the taxation rights on automatic digital services, not only in their domestic law, but also in their treaties. And last but not least, and I wanted here to connect Article 12A with the recent work of the OECD, be aware of your withholding tax on services in your domestic law or your treaties not being labeled as digital services taxes or unilateral measures or unilateral similar measures, because at the end, if the statement is implemented, and perhaps it is, there is a very clear point in this short document saying, well, the implementation of Pillar 1 might mean the disappear or the elimination or the dismantlation of digital service taxes or unilateral measures or unilateral similar measures. So I don't believe that actually these withholding taxes are digital service taxes or even unilateral similar measures, but of course, this is a position that should be defended. And I think I have exceeded 15 seconds, the 20 minutes I was assigned, but still, I'm really proud because those of you that know me know that I speak a lot, so I have done a quite good self-restraint. Thank you very much.